Joined today by Jake Cordran. Hello, Jake.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Paul.
Jake is our Chief Technical Officer in place at Vivolution. He works full-time with us and he's deeply experienced in the world of software and technical development. And I suppose as we get into this call and Jake explains more, Jake, great to have you on board. And I suppose if you could maybe introduce yourself a little at the start here and perhaps share with us how you ended up in this technology game.
Yeah, so thank you for having me, first of all. Yeah, I've been working in technology in various aspects for longer than I care to remember. But I started off sort of on the tools, as it were, working in market research and opinion polling, and got a sort of good grounding in databases and back-end technologies. From there, I sort of left the world of opinion polling and entered the world of software development with software development agencies, and sort of became more of a full stack developer, dealing with both databases, back-end code, but also getting into the front-end side of things and building web applications, mobile applications. These days, I try and keep my hand in on the tools, but I am more involved in the sort of infrastructure and technical project management side of things with Vivolution, managing a team of developers, and I get to sort of have a say in the technology stack, technology choices that we make at the start of a project, and all the fun stuff like requirements gathering and translating those business requirements into an actual product that we can build based on the best tools for the job, really.
And thank you for that. You mentioned you're off the tools and sometimes you're on the tools. Do you have a preference?
I've seen many people go just in one direction. As soon as you stop using the tools, it doesn't take long in software for your skills to be a little bit rusty, a little bit outdated, and it's very hard to go back the way. So I try and keep my hand in whenever I can, but it's easier said than done.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you, Jake. Diving into it, we're here today to talk about the minimum commercial viable product. What does that mean in layman's terms?
So you may well have heard the MVP acronym, the minimum viable product. What we're doing by adding that C in there for the commercial viability of it is taking it from something which is essentially a research tool for gaining insight into what might be a completely hypothetical product that you haven't really built anything out with, and introducing enough features so that you can actually generate some revenue with it. Now, if you're a startup or a scale up, that's the point you want to get to. Obviously, you want some sort of revenue coming in, and that's always a big milestone. So adding that sort of commercial viability in there, and expanding your minimum viable product, which may just be something that is bare bones or even just a prototype, and building that out to the point where you've got some features that people are actually willing to pay for. That's the sort of commercial step that we're talking about here, whilst keeping it slim enough that you're still adhering to the M, which is the minimum. You're not adding in just any features that you can, because that will burn time, it will burn effort and therefore money, which isn't particularly commercially minded. So that balance of keeping the sort of minimum set of features in there whilst making it commercially attractive to a sort of an early set of users is what the MCVP is all about.
Okay, thank you for that, Jake. And you did touch on the MVP, the minimal viable product, which is something that is quite more frequent and observed widely within particularly the startup, the scale-up phase, and the importance of getting an MVP to market. So if you could maybe just touch a little bit more on what's the real difference between MCVP and MVP.
Yeah, of course. So it might be helpful just to share a little slide here, actually. Hopefully you can see that. So when we talk about an MVP, to put the MCVP in context, it's useful to sort of see what an MVP is and what the limitations are. So when you're building an MVP, you're really just thinking about a possibly a single key feature, but certainly a minimum group of features just to demonstrate your idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is cohesive, like a product where you can log in and go through an entire customer journey. It just needs to be something that is sort of at the prototype level or a little bit beyond, where you can demonstrate this idea that you've got, that you want to bring to the world. You want to demonstrate to maybe investors or a friendly group of users, just to test this idea out, basically. So you're essentially using it like a research tool. You're saying, right, here's an idea. Here's sort of the bare bones of it that I want to demonstrate to you. What do you think about it? And then you can get this sort of rapid iteration of versions of it, if you like, where you can take on board any sort of feedback, objections that people might have, and refine it in a fairly rapid manner so that you can end up with something that you are pretty confident that the market is ready to receive. You know, there's a target audience out there for it. You've got a group of users in mind, and that group of users has looked at your idea and they've basically said, yes, this is something that I would use. This is something that would be useful to me. But you haven't necessarily gone through the full steps to make this a product that you can put out in the market that people are going to pay money for, which is really what we want. So when we introduce that C with the MCVP, what we do is we add in enough sort of functionality in there that people have got some sort of value that they can get from it. So rather than just being a hypothetical demonstration of something that we could do, it's a bit more of a concrete product where we've actually got some features in there that people have said, yes, I want that, I would use that, I would pay for it. It's also a bit more of a cohesive, self-contained product. So rather than just sort of feeling like a prototype that has bare bones of some individual features, it's a little bit more cohesive. You know, you'll have some branding in there, you'll have user accounts and everything to make it so that you can, as a user, you're sort of a self-service user, and it stands alone as a product rather than this disparate collection of features, which might just be a prototype. We also layer in this sort of scalable infrastructure and a tech stack, which is the most appropriate tech stack for what you're trying to do. So when you launch your product, obviously the ideal situation is that you get lots and lots of users using it at the same time, or maybe a great big spike of people downloading your app on day one. And we make sure that we provision that tech and the infrastructure to handle that as part of the commercialization of this, because nobody wants their app to fall over when everybody joins on day one, because that's not a great look. And obviously revenue generation, people are going to be paying for this, whether it's a subscription model, a one-off access fee, whatever your revenue model might be, you've got something here which supports that and people are willing to put their hand in their pocket and pay some money for.
Very interesting, and it's really nice to see that that table in front of us differentiating the difference between the MVP and the MCVP. So you did touch on it a little bit. You know, my next question leading into this is, well, why is an MCVP so important?
So well, let me come back here. So I think the MCVP is a natural extension to the MVP. So this isn't something that we're saying you need to jump straight into an MCVP and bypass the process to get there. But the importance of it, of course, is that you're demonstrating the commercial viability of this. Without that, you are still at a stage where you cannot say to somebody, right, okay, I've got an idea here which generates money. And that is essentially what you want as a startup, as a scale up. You need that revenue stream to keep building your business and keep scaling it out, keep growing that customer base. So by getting as far as that MCVP, that's a huge milestone for any business, because at that point, you've tipped over from spending money on trying to demonstrate your idea to having something which washes its face, essentially, can support itself. And at that point, hopefully you've got enough traction to take that into a fully fledged product.
Okay, thank you for that. And certainly from our experience in the commercial world, an early stage company, they often look for the commercial viability, and to generate any revenue as quickly and early as you can is really so important. So that MCVP will really help a young company deliver on that promise, which is great to see and great to know. You mentioned earlier in some of your points, you talked about the technology stack or the full stack. Could you maybe give us a little bit more information around that? Perhaps some of the listeners, maybe not fully up to speed with all the technical areas that you are, Jake.
Yeah, so with any product, you're gonna have sort of various layers of technology on there that you're building on. You might have a database, you might have some sort of server, which these days probably lives in the cloud somewhere on somebody else's computer. If you're building a mobile app, obviously you've got the app itself, which runs on your users' devices. And in between there, you've got the idea of web applications, which might use JavaScript and HTML that you're used to seeing in your browser, or maybe you've got desktop applications which run on your actual device using some native code. So all of these sort of layers of technology are what we call the technology stack. And depending on what your product is, you will have a different mix of these layers in the stack. So something that we always really see is this idea of a front end and a back end. So the front end is always going to be the things that your users are seeing. That's what's in their hands, on their devices that they're interacting with. And then you've got the sort of secret engine in the back, which is the back end, the database, the code that's running on a server. So it might be something which is implementing your business logic, doing your customers' accounts and keeping data secure in the back end. All of these layers are what make up the entire product, and getting that mix of it right, and making sure that you've sort of chosen, as I say, the right tools for the job is really important. And if you can get that right early, it means you've got a really strong foundation to build a product on.
Thank you very much for that, Jake. Thank you. So looking at the process of implementing an MCVP, how does Vivolution go about implementing this?
So I think you've done a previous webinar where you talked about the design-led development process, which leads up to this. So as a initial engagement, we will make sure that we go through a sort of workshopping process to make sure that we've got an idea of the actual requirements of what we're building. We make sure that we've got an idea of what elements of it are well understood. So maybe a client is coming to us with a lot of domain knowledge. They've worked in the business for a long time, and they can bring a lot of that knowledge with them and say, well, here's a problem that we've already solved, so we don't need to worry about that being a risk. Or it might be that they're coming and saying, right, we've never done this before. We believe it's possible, but it's never been tested. So that might be something that's a high risk. And we can factor all that in when we go through these workshops and nail down exactly what it is that we need to build. So again, these key features that make up the minimum part of the MVP or MCVP. Beyond that, we'll take it sort of through the wireframing stage, and then we'll start applying some design to it to make it look like it's actually going to when it is in the customer's hands. Once we get up to the sort of prototyping and the technical specification, that's where we can start moving into actually writing some code, getting the tools out and building something. So once we are in the development stage and we are confident in what we're building, that's when we sort of move into a cycle of what we call sprints. So the idea of an agile development methodology where you can break this down into bite-sized chunks, if you like, and iterate through them fairly rapidly with the clients engaged in that process, so you can see what's happening at all times. The opposite of that being a waterfall methodology, where we go through the entire process, build the entire product, and at the end we would go, ta-da, what do you think? And the client has no opportunity for feedback until everything is baked into it. Using this agile methodology, we can have several iterations of it and maybe make changes as we go, because there's always going to be something which changes along the way. You can never get it right first time, but by allowing for that and having those changes as we go through, you can accommodate that and sort of mold the product as you go through, as these things come up during the process.
Thank you. You've talked about the likes of, you've thrown in the words in such as bite size, sprint, early testing, rapid, and you've touched on agile as well. So, all these are, accelerating the processes, which I'm sure, anybody in this call, startup scale-ups, will want to hear. What are the actual advantages of an agile approach?
So certainly for something which is this early stage, where I say, you've got things which might be well known, and you've got things which are going to be less well known. By building and sort of baking into the process this idea that you have these short sprints. Let's say that maybe 2 weeks, arbitrarily, and at the end of those 2 weeks, we can see what's been completed, but it might be that something's taken longer than expected. It might be more complicated than expected. Or on the flip side, it might be that something's easier than expected. And that means we've got some extra time where we can pull in a new feature and say, well, we've got a couple of extra days here. We can get some extra things added into the product. And by having that process of the rapid iterations where the client is involved, you can see what's going on. It means that we can sort of shape it as we go along and accommodate any of these hurdles and things which might change. To go into a brand new build like this and assume you're going to get it right first time is, to be quite honest, quite foolhardy. You need to accept that there will be some things which aren't as predicted, for better or for worse. There are plenty of times when you get things which just work, and it's lovely. It's a great feeling. It means you can just move on to the next thing. But to accommodate that flow of changes, this agile approach where you have these bite-sized chunks rather than this huge, great project, by breaking it down, you can actually see what's going on at a granular level and manage it as things happen.
Very good. Very good. So we've talked about the benefits of the minimum commercial viable product. If I'm a caller on this call just now and I'm thinking, right, I've got a technology idea, or I've got something that's advanced in my mind, in my head, and let's bring this and try to put it onto the shelf. Let's try to create this. Why should I spend my hard-earned money with you or with Vivolution? Why should I do that, Jake?
Well, now you're getting into the money part, and that's a you question. I think definitely I can build this, but you can tell them why they should come.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was waiting for that to come. Okay, so you're turning it back on me, which is fine. You've given us the technical benefits of the minimal commercial viable product. I've picked up that, we have the ability as Vivolution to rapidly iterate your idea. We can work closely with you as a client. We can react accordingly with our agile approach. And I know from working with you and our team that we've got quite a hands-on approach. So we don't just give you the blueprint and then walk away. And I suppose with those weekly, monthly check-ins, we can really keep our fingers on the pulse of creating this minimum commercial viable product. So that's maybe why you could come to Vivolution. That was a good plug. So we're over 2/3 of the way through here. Just a few more questions, Jake, if I may. This all sounds great. And if I'm a caller here, I'm thinking, right, it almost can sound too good to be true. How do I believe we're credible? You're credible. Do you have a recent client that you've created an MCVP for, and or how did that play out, please?
Well, I suppose the most recent example is actually sort of a virtual classroom product that we've been working on. Now, this is something that's come from a fairly well-established business which have been doing other things in the education space. So they've got a friendly customer base, if you like, which means that they sort of trust what they've been putting out before, and now we're going to be trying to do something a little bit different, but they're still paying customers, so that's where this commercial viability comes in. So it's not that we're just doing a bare bones feature set here, but because they're used to this virtual classroom idea where everything's online, you've got remote learners sitting in front of a webcam a little bit like we are now, you end up with a sort of disparate collection of tools. So, you know, there's lots of different providers of conference call software. You know, you've got Zoom and Teams and all the rest of them. And likewise, there's lots of different providers of lesson planners, calendars, online coding environments. So what we're trying to do is pull all these together into one place so that you're not switching between all of these different providers. Now, what these different providers are doing is all very well established. So we're not going to be wasting time trying to reinvent the wheel. So we're not going to be building conference call software. We're not going to be building chat rooms. We're not going to be building calendars. Because that's not minimum. That's all been done. So the way that we would approach this is we're sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, if you like, and we're integrating things which people who have built much better before us, and we can piggyback off those things. But the way that we pull them together is what is unique here. So what we're trying to do is pull all these disparate services into one online dashboard where you can have a teacher and learner environment without them having to switch between various pieces of software, various different services that they're signing in and out of. They can control everything from one place, sit in front of one browser, and have this sort of integrated learning experience where they've got a face-to-face call going on, they've got chat happening, and they've also got their learning environment where they might be learning to code, and pull this all into one place. So the unique thing and the minimal thing that we're doing here is pulling all these services together and stitching them together in a certain way, which means you're no longer having to sort of flip between all these different windows. But like I say, there's lots of stuff that's already built, so we wouldn't try rebuilding that. It's all about integrating things that already work in a way that demonstrates this new idea.
Very interesting. And just on that, the terms of rebuilding what's already been done. We've got a question that's been emailed through. Folks, we've got 6 minutes left on the call. So if any of you do have any questions, by the way, on anything we've discussed now, feel free to pop it in the chat now. We can react to it here as best we can, or you can obviously follow up later in the call. One of the questions that's been emailed is if I've got an MVP, do I need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or can I pick up where I left off? Which is an excellent question. Can you?
That's a great question.
Explain that? Yeah.
I'll answer that with a slight cop-out answer of it depends. So my thought is that you should be prepared to throw it away and start again, because one of the things that you might learn from your MVP is that you need to do it differently. So it's not necessarily that the idea is bad, but the implementation may need to change. And at that point is probably the second best time to throw it out. The best time was to start correctly the first time. That's a bit of an idealized situation. The second best time is now. Don't sort of drag inappropriate technology stacks through to your MCVP and your product, because eventually that is going to become an obstacle for you. So depending on what you have learned from your MVP, be prepared to throw it away. But it might be that you have got a lot of stuff right and you can continue that into your MCVP. Cherry pick those bits that work and we'll keep those. We don't need to rebuild that. The things that may be slowing you down or don't quite work with the rest of the stack, then be prepared to throw that away and take a fresh look at it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jake. Well, look, that's been very informative. Thank you for walking us through the minimum commercial viable product. I've just got a question coming in here from Iffy, if I may ask. Let me see just while I bring it up. Oh, where did that go? Sorry, it's maybe in the Q&A. Apologies, Jake.
Oh, I think I can see it. Is that the question about taking account of the ability to scale in the future?
Yes, it will be. Yes. Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. So part of the commercialization is obviously being able to support a certain number of users. Now that number of users may be small to begin with, but your wish, of course, is to gain traction fast. And if you need to pause your product and say, well, hang on a minute, guys, it's going to be offline for a couple of months while we change things about to support you, that's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. It's not going to be a great experience. So what I always do when we're looking at the tech stack and the infrastructure is making sure that we use the benefits of cloud technology, where you can have things sort of rumbling along on a very low tier to start with, but at a flick of a switch, you can scale up to something which can support hundreds, thousands of users if need be. So yes, we definitely bake in that scalability and an element of redundancy as well. You know, if things fall over, we've got a backup that'll pick up that slack and keep things running. So that is definitely a difference between the MCVP and the MVP. MVP, bare bones, don't worry if it falls over, we'll fix it. MCVP, we need to make sure that it's running at all times so that the customers get a good experience because they're going to be paying for it.
Thank you, Jake. We have another question coming in. Iffy, please let me know if you'd like any more information on that question. Final question here, Jake, is it easier to build the MCVP or if you have built the MVP?
Yes, that's a nice straight easy yes for that one. Hopefully your MVP has given you enough information and feedback from the things that you've been doing with either early adopter customers or user testing to give you a really high confidence level that what you're doing with your MCVP is going to be well received. There's a market out there for it. You're approaching it in the right way so that users are going to be receptive to it. I think the path that you take from that initial engagement where, like I say, we go through workshops, work out what we know, what we don't know, what are we going to build, through to the MVP where we can validate that our assumptions about what we're building are correct. And if not, we change them. By the time you get to that MCVP and you're trying to get a bit of revenue from it, you've got that really high confidence level that what you're doing and how you're going about it is very, very likely to be well received, successful, and the tools that we're using to do it, the technology stack that we're going to do it, are going to support that user base that we're looking to target.
Thanks for that, Jake. We've got 1 minute to go. If anybody has any further questions, feel free to pop it in the chat. Folks, I'm just going to quickly and unashamedly plug what Vivolution is and what we're doing. So if you bear with me, I shall just share my screen to let you know how you can get in touch with us should you need to. So I'll just share the screen here. Sorry, the sunshine's coming in and I see the right button here. So if we just come through here, can you see my screen here, Jake? Can you just confirm?
I can see you're turning innovation into revenue slide now.
Yeah, great. Great. So folks, please excuse this will be a 30-second plug, but this is what Vivolution do. So we currently carry out 4 main services. We have design-led development here that moves very quickly into software development, and that's the MCVP that Jake has just walked through. We also offer commercialization expertise, and we also offer investor readiness. Should you wish to have any questions on any of our modular services, we can be a one-stop shop. We can do all 4, should that be a good fit. If not, you can take a pick of any of these 4 services. Get in touch with us at hello@vivolution.co.uk, or here's our phone number as well, 0141 212 2533. Okay, that's us done for today. It's just taken us up to 1 o'clock. Jake, thank you so much for the time and effort you've put into this. Everybody on the call, thank you very much for coming onto the call. Any questions or any follow-ups, please drop me an email if suits, hello@vivolution.co.uk. We will be having our 3rd series of webinars sometime in early December, whereby we'll let you know about that, which will be in commercialization. Have a great week, everybody. And thank you very much again, Jake, for your time.